now, your True Adventure host, Bill Burrud.
Hi there, this is Bill Burrud saying, welcome to Adventure. True adventure filmed as it happens throughout our fascinating world. Take the ingredients of a human being, miles of desolation and intense heat. Put them together, and you have either survival or death in the desert sun. It's happened before, and it'll happen again as man challenges the forces of nature in search of true adventure. Many of those who've perished amid the sun-baked salt flats and wind-blown dunes of the great American desert need not have died had they only known a few of the simple secrets of desert survival. The place, Death Valley, California. The time, any time, for it's changeless, hot, and lifeless. The labels that men have branded into the valley floor give testimony to its forbidding nature. Bad water, the Devil's Cornfield, Dante's Inferno, Furnace Creek, stovepipe wells. Survival in the desert. That's the basis of our story on True Adventure. A story that began with the 49ers but has no ending. For each year, scores of people lose their lives in the blistering rays of the desert sun. Filmed on location in Death Valley, California, our True Adventure is entitled Land of Death. The 49ers called it Death Valley. The name stuck. It's 140 miles long, anywhere from 6 to 14 miles across, about the same shape as a Gila monster. About the same disposition, too. The Indians called it Tomasha, ground of fire, and that's what it is. A furnace of desert heat and glare. There are salt flats, bare rock canyons, sand dunes, and scorpions. There are ghost towns and lonely graves. Death Valley. The name can make you feel unwelcome. Death Valley is a national monument now. Visitors come to remember and relive the colorful and often violent days when prospectors and miners flocked here, followed by businessmen and bandits. They were often lean days. You lived on flapjacks and beans, drank coffee that would float an anvil. At least that's what the old-timers will tell you. Still, some folks struck it rich. A lot of others wound up no worse off than when they started. And there was always the dream of what you might find over that ridge. Too often, though, the dream became a nightmare. Maps might be incomplete or inaccurate. And in this superheated wilderness, one mistake, one error of judgment was likely to be fatal. Of course, this scene is a dramatization, but the setting is real. The sun, the heat, and the desert. And this is the way it happened, often enough. A man dying of thirst in the desert does everything he can to find water, but only a major miracle can save him. He can expect no mercy from these surroundings, only furnace heat and humidity that sometimes reaches zero. Death from thirst. Perhaps the most agonizing death there is, preceded by the last insane attempts to dig for water. Jim Dayton, found dead in 1899. His friend Shorty Harris died in 1934. But not all Death Valley graves are marked. A lot of men found it adventurous in the old days, exploring Death Valley and the surrounding hills. How many ended their careers like this? Unmourned, anonymous forever. Even now, there's more truth and poetry in the name Death Valley. And its extremes aren't just those of temperature. This sign is at sea level, but the valley floor drops to a low of 282 feet below sea level, the lowest spot in the Western Hemisphere, the hottest too. Although many of the 49er trails are now modern roads, they take visitors all over the valley. The National Park Service has warning signs posted all over. You can get into all kinds of trouble off the main roads. This is just one kind, but whatever happens, in the event of breakdown or accident, the voice of experience says, stay put. No unnecessary exertions. Keep in whatever shade you can find. Wait for help. Usually, it will get there. Usually. The art of staying out of trouble on a trip through the desert consists largely of the careful application of common sense before starting out. To get to any out-of-the-way places, a four-wheel drive vehicle is almost a necessity. And our True Adventure camera crew is determined not to overlook any of the finer points of desert safety. The radiator is checked. There'll be plenty of water aboard. After all, the summer temperature in Death Valley has been known to hit 134 degrees Fahrenheit. That was a world record for quite a while, and incidentally, that 134 degrees Fahrenheit was in the shade, until there was a blistering day in Azaziza, North Africa, and it topped that temperature by just 2 degrees. In spite of this, on a day-in, day-out average basis, Death Valley is still credited as being the hottest place anywhere in the world. Basically, we're going to do something different. We're going to follow the route taken by the 49ers from Furnace Creek at the eastern edge across the valley to Wild Rose Canyon on the western slope. Now, we're taking it in a modern four-wheel drive vehicle, but this kind of a vehicle was the kind the 49ers used way back in the old days. Wagons like this one brought the first white men to Death Valley. The 49ers were on their way from Salt Lake City to the California gold fields. Several parties of them decided to push due west across unknown country in the hope of saving time, rather than follow the established route south through San Bernardino. Of course, they had no idea of what they were getting into. You see, California had led an almost idyllic existence in the early days. But the 1840s saw conflict between the United States and Mexico erupt into war, a war that made Upper California a U.S. territory. California's old order was gone. A whole new era was about to begin. John Sutter came to California in 1839, borrowed money, built a fort, became the patriarch of Sacramento Valley. He had a sawmill on the American River. And on January 24th, 1848, an employee of Sutter's named James Marshall discovered gold. On the slopes of the Sierra Nevada, there was gold to be had virtually for the effort of bending down to pick up the nuggets. At least, that's the way the news got around. One man found 70 ounces of pure gold one day, 90 ounces the next. Another man gathered in $20,000 in 6 weeks. All of a sudden, California was the place to be, and prospectors literally poured in from everywhere. The 49ers entered Death Valley here at Furnace Creek. From here, they started west toward the Panamint Range in the distance, under shimmering heat waves. saw this first, the stretch called the Devil's Golf Course. Ironically enough, geologists tell us that Death Valley's history includes several lengthy periods spent completely underwater. The valley as it is today began forming about 1 million years ago, and during the last ice age, a lake filled the southern and central part to an estimated depth of 600 feet. When the lake dried up, it left behind these pinnacles of muddy salt. Some of them a foot high. But the valley floor isn't all quite so inhospitable. If you know where to look for it, there's water to be found, even in the middle of a terrifying summer. This stream runs out into the desert and then disappears. Some of the water you come across is brackish, but drinkable. Some of it has to be boiled for safety's sake. But in spite of Park Service conveniences like this, Death Valley is still quite capable of taking its toll of the careless and the unwary. If there'd been something like this on the trail in the year of 1849, a lot of extraordinary history would never have been written. For example, there was the Manly Bennett 49er party, which included women and children in those old wagons we saw a moment ago. Unable to go on a retreat, they camped by a Death Valley spring, while two men named Manly and Rogers hiked out to find a settlement 300 miles away. They not only made it, but they came 300 miles back to bring food to their starving friends. An example of courage and chivalry that's hardly ever been equaled. There was wealth to be dug out of Death Valley. Here's all that's left of the Harmony Borax Works, the enterprise that gave us the 20 Mule Team. And the huge, especially built wagons in which they hauled borax to the railroad at Mojave. Here, you can reach out a hand and touch yesterday. Beyond the adobe ruins of the Harmony Borax Works, the road winds through Mustard Canyon. Here and everywhere else in Death Valley, a sense of the past is immediate and tangible. Not just the pioneer past of the mule skinners and the miners. That was no time ago at all. The way this landscape measures time, because Death Valley's rock formations cover the entire span of geologic history, back to when the Earth was young. The distant past is often only inches away. Our True Adventure cameras are exploring Death Valley. The name was prophetic of those later years when pioneers and prospectors were turning Death Valley into a legend, filling in the map with place names that were as colorful as the men who gave them and as grim as the land itself. Names like Tombstone Flat, the Funeral Mountains, the Coffin Mine. But the names don't really do justice to the valley. There are often astonishing signs of life here. Coyotes, for instance, leave tracks along the edges of Salt Creek looking for waterfowl. Even in Death Valley, hunter and hunted maintain their precarious balance. Here, where the temperature skyrockets and the humidity hovers just above zero, tiny fish swim in the shallow waters of Salt Creek. Amazingly enough, these inch-long creatures are relics of the Ice Age. They're descended from fish that lived in the lake that covered this part of the valley floor thousands upon thousands of years ago. But signs of water are few and far between, and thirst isn't simply a matter of discomfort. It's a sign of imperative need. A man driving a car with the temperature at 110 degrees may have to drink almost a quart of water every hour in order to keep up his bodily efficiency. And here in Death Valley, summertime temperatures inside a car often climb to 140 degrees. Indians lived on the edges of the valley when the pioneers arrived, Indians and evil spirits. These closed in when a man grew too old to keep up with the constant nomadic search for food. When that happened, old folks were left behind to starve to death. The sand dunes figure prominently in the writings of the 49ers, who found them treacherous to men and oxen alike. Dunes of bare sand that cover 14 square miles. Winds ripple their surface and often stir up blinding sandstorms worse than the Sahara Desert. In surroundings like these, evil spirits that the Indians believed in aren't too hard to conjure up. One thing about the dunes from our viewpoint, there is adventure to be had just by digging into the sand. It's a gun barrel, old and corroded. We've no way of knowing whom it belonged to or how it got there. The one thing that's sure is that we've dipped back into time and brought back evidence of a human drama played out here on the sands generations ago. Here's the spot, not far from Salt Creek, where the Jayhawkers burned their wagons. The Jayhawkers were a group of young men who made up one of the 49er parties. They took one look at the Panamint Range across the valley, decided to travel light. Killing the weakest of their half-starved oxen, they dried the meat over the fires of the burning wagons and made the crossing on foot without trouble. Only death and misfortune catch up with them in the mountains and the further deserts beyond. In the Panamints Wild Rose Canyon, 10 huge charcoal kilns were built in the 1860s. Our true adventure cameras find all of them still standing. Designed by Swiss engineers, they were built by Chinese coolies, stoked by Death Valley Indians, all to make charcoal for the smelter at the Modoc Mines, 25 miles away. Also in the Panamints, here's what's left of the town of Skidoo, named after the remarked 23 Skidoo, a few buildings, mining machinery, not much for a turn-of-the-century mining boom town. A single side tunnel in one Skidoo mine yielded $500,000 in gold. The town even had a telephone line connecting it with Rhyolite across the valley. Now, there's not much but memories. In the Funeral Mountains on the far side of Death Valley, Rhyolite is little more than a collection of crumbling adobe walls and a few stone foundations. Located just over the state line, Rhyolite was one of Nevada's busiest cities for just 3 years, from 1905 to 1908. 5,000 to 10,000 people lived here, depending on how many suburbs you included. The big business was gold. Rhyolite mined $3 million worth of gold in its day, and a good deal of it changed hands right here in town. For a while, Rhyolite lived high, wide, and handsome. The boom lasted 3 years. The bust came in 1909. What stories these ruins could tell. The city of Rhyolite owed its start to Shorty Harris, whose grave we saw earlier down on the valley floor next to Jim Dayton's. In 1904, he sunk his pick into a chunk of green speckled gold ore and called his strike the Bullfrog. Inside 2 years, Rhyolite had grown up almost on the spot, with a 3-story hotel and a bank, 2 churches, a stock exchange, a $20,000 school, and 2 railroad depots. Shorty Harris signed away his claim for a mere $1,000. When the bust came, the population trickled away. 30 years later, in 1939, Rhyolite had 7 residents. Today, there are only ghosts. Like so many other mining towns of the West, Rhyolite had a short life and a merry one. When it died, I think an era died too. The wild, wide-open frontier way of life had faded into history. But the lure of adventure and excitement didn't die with the last of the old mining boom towns. It's very much alive in Death Valley still. This bizarre land of death still attracts the adventurous spirit, still claims victims. A victim of the elements. In spite of modern roads, in spite of water pumps and emergency telephones and patrols, Death Valley in the summer is still the Indians' ground of fire that it was a century or more ago. Maybe there's no room for the one-blanket jackass prospector in the modern world, but in Death Valley, he lives on in the individualistic tradition of pioneer days. Out there in the desert, he's still one of the best and truest symbols of true adventure. Death Valley. A land of mystery and quiet beauty and sometimes lingering death. We'd like to extend our thanks to the National Park Service for their splendid cooperation during the filming of this picture. Thanks to the constant vigilance of the park rangers, Death Valley is developing into one of our most interesting national monuments. If you plan a visit to the area in search of your own true adventure, make it a point to fill the rangers in on your plans. Stay off the unpatrolled roads. Avoid the abandoned mine shafts. Plan to take your Death Valley journey during the winter months. During the summer, the temperatures rise to unbearable heights and the monument is officially closed. Well, until we meet again, this is Bill Burrud saying, may all your adventures wherever they may be in the whole wide world, be happy ones.